Haribol. Sure. See ya. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Nanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Vishnupada Paramahansa Varujikacharya Astotra the Shishi Mata Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Varujikacharya Astotra the Shishi Mata Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai and Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. All right, time out. Sorry. Okay. On this 23rd day of December 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 5 entitled Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. Text number 12, page 239. Yukta karma palam tyaktva. Text 12. Shantim apnoti naishtikim ayukta kamakarena phalai sakto nibadyate yukta karma palang tyaktva shantim apnoti naishtikim ayukta kamakarena Pale sakto nabadhyate yukta karma palam chaktva shantimapnoti naishtikim ayukta kamakarena pale sakto nabadhyate. Yukta karma palam chaktva Shantimapnoti naishtikim ayukta kamakarena pale sakto nibadyate. Translation. The steadily devoted soul attains unadulterated peace because he offers the result of all activities to me. Whereas a person who is not in union with the divine, who is greedy for the fruits of his labor, becomes entangled. Purport. The difference between a person in Krishna consciousness and a person in bodily consciousness is that the former is attached to Krishna, whereas the latter is attached to the results of his activities. The person who is attached to Krishna and works for him only is certainly a liberated person, and he has no anxiety over the results of his work. In the Bhagavatam, the cause of anxiety over the result of an activity is explained as being one's functioning in the conception of duality, that is, without knowledge of the absolute truth. Krishna is the supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead. In Krishna consciousness, there is no duality. All that exists is a product of Krishna's energy, and Krishna is all good. Therefore, activities in Krishna consciousness are on the absolute plane. They are transcendental and have no material effect. One is therefore filled with peace in Krishna consciousness. But one who is entangled in profit calculation for sense gratification cannot have that peace. This is the secret of Krishna consciousness. Realization that there is no existence besides Krishna is the platform of peace and fearlessness. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chukshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. Hare Krishna. Okay. So, Krishna is describing the one who is yukta, who is in yoga, as Prabhupada defines it, one who is engaged in devotional service. And one who is engaged in devotional service gives up the fruits of his work. Who does he give it up to? He gives it up to Krishna. That's made clear in the purport. He's not just giving it up, but he's giving it for Krishna. And indeed, the motive of his work is to please Krishna. So such a person gets shanti, or peace. This shanti was spoken of quite a bit in the second chapter. And Krishna kind of summarized his teaching there, who can really be peaceful? And his famous phrase, how can there be any happiness without peace? Remember that? So, let's see, where is this verse? It's right near the end here. I thought it was right near the end. Here it is, 71, the second to last verse. It's similar ideas. Vihaya kamans yaksarvan pumam chadadi nixpraha nirmamol narahankara sashanti marigachati. This is at page 135. A person who has given up all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, who has given up all sense of proprietorship and is devoid of false ego, he alone can attain real peace. Now, all of that is a byproduct of Krishna consciousness. Given up all desires for sense gratification. So someone who's wholly and solely in Krishna consciousness, his desires are to please Krishna. There's this one well-known definition of bhakti by Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He says, Sarvopadi vinu muktam tatpadatvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakta ruchite. So bhakti is defined here as giving up all the false designations surrounding this body. Sarva upadi vinu muktam tatpadatvena nirmalam, being completely purified of these misconceptions. And with one's senses, serving the master of the senses. Not serving the senses themselves on the misconception that that's you. Rishikesha sevanam. This is defined as bhakti. So that's how one can be free of kama, of desires. And therefore he's living desireless. And then he has no sense of false possessiveness and no false ego, false sense of self. Such a person gets peace. Now it's not mentioned here in the second chapter, but those qualities are attainable only by one in Krishna consciousness. And here it's a similar thing. One is yukta. He's linked up. He's in yoga with Krishna consciousness. Karma palam tyakva. Gives up the fruit for the interest of Krishna. Shamtam apnoti naishtikim. And he attains peace because he's unflinching in this situation of being linked up to Krishna and giving up the fruits. On the other hand, ayukta kamakarine, one who acts on the basis of personal desire, he gets attached to the fruits of his work, and is bound up by that attachment. So this is the contrast here. Now there's a wonderful verse by Lord Chaitanya speaking to Sanatana Goswami about who's peaceful. So he says there's basically 4 different categories of human beings. By the largest group, 99.99%, is he defines as bhukti kamis. A kami is a person who lusts after something, strongly desires something. Kama is the desire itself. So, Krishna Bhakta, Nishkama, Ata Eva Shanta. Bhukti Mukti Siddhi Kami, Sakali Ashanta. No peace. So first he says, because the devotees have no personal desire, therefore they're peaceful. It means that their activities are motivated by a desire to please Krishna. And therefore, whatever they can do in that regard is successful. They're acting under the authorized means to please Krishna. We learn how to do that, chanting his name, so many different things in Bhakti Yoga. So if we're making our best effort to actually do those things, chanting and controlling the mind, everything else, then that's pleasing to Krishna, if we're doing it sincerely. And so because we're part and parcel of Krishna, then we feel this peace and this growing happiness and satisfaction in our lives. It takes time to fix the mind constantly on that. But the cause of lack of peace, which is unfulfilled desires. It mentions in the 18th chapter, Brahmabhuta prasanatma na shochiti na kankshiti. Shochiti means to lament, kankshiti means to long for material things. So when you study the lives of materialists, or we just look back to our own lives before we knew anything about Krishna, we can see that our lives were governed by those things. You desire some position, something, and you go for it, and then you can't get it, you lament, or you get it and lose it, and you lament. There's always these things hovering about. There's something more to want and something more to lament over. And it just by the force of time, these things are always, this duality is always pushing around by those who are absorbed in material affairs, material consciousness. So Brahmabhuta means to rise above that, to rise above the modes of nature and this desiring material things. And then one's natural joyousness is realized. Prasanatma means very joyful. And Brahmabhuta Nashoti Nikanda Samak Sarvesha Bhuta. So you see everyone equally as a spirit soul. You're not seeing by the externals. You're seeing the spirit souls, and where possible, you try to engage in that spirit soul in devotional service, knowing that this is the most pleasing thing for Krishna. And in this way, one attains to bhakti. Mad bhaktim labate param. So it comes later in the 18th chapter. But this simple equation here, being linked up to Krishna with Krishna consciousness, giving over the fruits of one's action for the interest of the Lord, therefore not being bound by those fruits, one attains peace. On the other hand, one who's not in linking up to Krishna acts on the basis of kama. He becomes attached to the fruits of his activities, and he's bound up, and he's anything but peaceful. So this is, following in the argument of the whole chapter, what is real sannyas? What is real renunciation? And we discussed, and as Krishna discusses, it has to be accompanied by yoga. Otherwise, it just brings trouble. And yoga means that you're developing your vairagya, which is the real basis of true sannyas. Vairagya meaning detachment, and sannyas meaning actually just giving up. If you're giving things up, but you're not you're trying to avoid material attachment, but you're not becoming attached to Krishna and Krishna consciousness, then you're on a very shaky platform. And eventually that sannyas becomes troublesome and you give it up. So the yukta is yoga, bhakti yoga. That's the essential aspect here. Okay. So Prabhupada says that one who is attached to Krishna works for him only is certainly a liberated person. This idea of liberated from what? Liberated from the bonds of your attachment to things in this world and your previous activities. That liberation is not something you try for separately. That's awarded by Krishna. The more that you're absorbed in serving Krishna and his interests and giving the fruits of your activity, then the other things just fade away automatically. That becomes your liberation. All that exists is a product of Krishna's energy, and Krishna is all good. Now, I don't know if we change this one, but we should. All good has a hyphen in it. There's a word Prabhupada would use. All good means everything he does, everything about Krishna is good. He's all good. He's always auspicious. Even though sometimes we seem to be suffering in the material world, even though we're trying to be Krishna conscious. But we should remember immediately the great devotees who went through so much. The Pandavas, Prahlad, even Srila Prabhupada, the great preachers. Prabhupada would often cite Jesus Christ as someone who was determined to preach despite the dangers, and he met crucifixion after that. So everything Krishna does is good, and this was Arjun's fallacy at the beginning. Even though Krishna wanted him to fight, he was thinking, no, that's bad, because I'll be responsible for all these people dying, and the women will be unprotected and all. It's not good that I'm fighting, But he came to the right conclusion in the end, of course. So this idea of peace, one is therefore filled with peace in Krishna consciousness because your activities are not producing any karma, any result in the material world. Whatever you're doing is getting credit in the spiritual world. In other words, you're building your road, back to God. Yesterday we were talking about this Sadhu Sangashtika. I think I went through it, right? And he talks about anukramishati, step by step, in the association of devotees, hearing and chanting, purifying one's existence. And then he says, Tat Joshanat Ashu Apavarga Vartmani, quickly, following this path of liberation, this liberated path, one develops Shraddha and Rati and Bhakti, Anukramishati, step by step. So those are the three essentials for devotional service. The faith in the process, faith in Krishna and the Guru and the words, and faith in that Krishna will empower one to be able to practice. And gradual attraction for everything related to Krishna. His service, his holy name, the deities, prasadam, and all these different. And bhakti. Bhakti, which here means pure devotional service in relation to Krishna. They develop one by one. And then the next verse he says, and this is the easiest process of yoga, Vijubir yoga. It don't involve severe austerities. It doesn't involve, especially in this age, it doesn't involve going off somewhere, and performing other things that is practically impossible. It's practical. All right, let's go on. Text 13. Sarva karmani manasa sannyasyaaste sukham vashi navadvare pare dehi naivakovan nakariyan. When the embodied living being controls his nature and mentally renounces all actions, he resides happily in the city of 9 gates, the material body, neither working nor causing work to be done. So that city of 9 gates should be familiar. That's Puranjan. You remember that? Purport. The embodied soul lives in the city of 9 gates. The activities of the body, or the figurative city of the body, are conducted automatically by its particular modes of nature. The soul, although subjecting himself to the conditions of the body, can be beyond those conditions if he so desires. Owing only to forgetfulness of his superior nature, he identifies with the material body and therefore suffers. By Krishna consciousness, he can revive his real position and thus come out of his embodiment. Therefore, when one takes to Krishna consciousness, one at once becomes completely aloof from the bodily activities. In such a controlled life, in which his deliberations are changed, he lives happily within the city of 9 gates. The 9 gates are mentioned as follows: Navadvare Pure Dehi Hangso Le La Yate Bahi Vashi Sarvasya Lokasya Stavarasya Charasya Cha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is living within the body of a living entity, is the controller of all living entities all over the universe. The body consists of 9 gates: 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, 1 mouth, the anus, and the genitals. The living entity in his conditioned stage identifies himself with the body, but when he identifies himself with the Lord within himself, he becomes just as free as the Lord, even while in the body. Shvetashvata Upanishad 3:18. Therefore, a Krishna-conscious person is free from both the outer and inner activities of the material body. So here he describes the same situation. He controls his nature, mentally renounces all actions. So the first renunciation is actually within the mind. You know, you're going against the natural conditioned tendency to think of something, some plan, and do it, and then create something from it, some situation, some money or whatever it is, and then to be attached to that because it's all coming from your mind and your activities. But that renunciation really takes place first in the mind. Okay, I'm going to do this activity, but whatever I get from it, it's for Krishna. And so while you're doing it, you're also feeling that, oh, I'm doing this for Krishna. Like if you're working in the kitchen, if you're really in Krishna consciousness, say, oh, I'm preparing this for Krishna. It has to be very clean, it has to be just right, you know, and you're putting as much care into it because Krishna's going to eat it. It's for him. I'm doing it for him. So that's the mental aspect is really the foundation of the whole process of Krishna consciousness, and that's why he mentally renounces all actions, resides happily in the city of 9 gates, neither working nor causing work to be done. So this idea of, it looks like we're working, but it's not producing any reaction, therefore it's not considered actual karma. So he's describing this situation. And I think soon he's going to start talking about Brahma Nirvana. That comes up a little later. Okay, let's go on. Nakartatvam nakarmani lokasya svajati prabhu nakarma palasangyogam svabhavas tupavartate. The embodied spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. Purport. The living entity, as will be explained in the 7th chapter, is one of the energies or natures of the Supreme Lord, but is distinct from matter, which is another nature called inferior of the Lord. Somehow the superior nature, the living entity, has been in contact with material nature since time immemorial. The temporary body or material dwelling place which he obtains is the cause of varieties of activities and their resultant reactions. Living in such a conditional atmosphere, one suffers the results of the activities of the body by identifying himself in ignorance with the body. It is ignorance acquired from time immemorial that is the cause of bodily suffering and distress. As soon as the living entity becomes aloof from the activities of the body, he becomes free from the reactions as well. As long as he is in the city of the body, he appears to be the master of it, but actually he is neither its proprietor nor controller of its actions and reactions. He is simply in the midst of the material ocean, struggling for existence. The waves of the ocean are tossing him, and he has no control over them. His best solution is to get out of the water by transcendental Krishna consciousness. That alone will save him from all turmoil. So this is a very fascinating thing, which is, kind of emphasized in this chapter, is to someone who's really transcendental, he's kind of watching the body work, but he realizes that this isn't me, it's just a complicated machine, and it's working according to the modes of nature. We will remember the verse, you may remember in the 3rd chapter, Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. The soul who's bewildered by false ego, the false sense of self, which is what's being described here. I am the body, right? Ahankara vimudhatma. The Atma, soul, who's vimudha, quickly bewildered, totally bewildered by ahankar. He thinks, I'm doing all these things. I'm the actor. Kartaham, I am the one and only actor. But actually, prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha, that all these activities are being carried out by material nature, under the 3 modes of material nature. So where do we come in? What's our role as souls? We're sitting in the suspended by these 5 airs in the region of the heart, and what's going on is that we are desiring. We're in this complicated vehicle called the material body, which we think is ourselves but isn't. And we desire things, just like I desire to pick up this water, right? It's not that I have to figure out how to, send all the impulses from the brain and contract the muscle. That's all being done automatically. But I'm desiring, and the super soul is picking up that desire and understands, right? Exactly. And through the demigods and through the complicated machinery of the material world, working under the 3 modes, he's controlling the material energy to fulfill that desire, if I'm worthy of it. If it happens that my good luck has run out, I can't pick up this water because my hand suddenly became paralyzed, that's the way it is. It's not the fault of the super soul. It's not anyone. It's just some reaction I'm getting. I don't know that. I just think, oh, my bad luck. Now I have to go to I just had a stroke or whatever. In other words, I. It's all surrounding up this body. But really, when you understand the reality of it, we're not doing anything. We're just desiring to do this and that. And the machine is working, just like you're riding in a car. What are you really doing? You're pushing, the gas pedal. You're pushing the brake pedal. I used to have, a stick shift. You have to push the clutch, and all this stuff, and all you're controlling, right? So, but you're just pushing the buttons. The whole thing is being carried out by the machinery of the car, and the engineers have engineered it so it'll happen that way. So. Similarly, this body is a car, and all we're doing is we have a will, a desire to do something, and it's picked up, and the whole complicated machinery with the brain and the nerves and everything is going on, and chemical reactions are going on. So the realized soul, he's realizing I'm not actually doing anything. I'm just desiring it, and my whole destiny is determined by the nature of my desires. If I'm taking my cues for what to desire by the impulses of these senses, then I'm bound up to this material body, one after another. And I know it produces suffering. And it gets sick, it gets old, it dies, you get rebirth. And I don't want that. You learn from the Shastra, I can escape this. But I have to change the nature of my desires. And that's and only in human life can you hear and read and understand. And the brain and the intelligence, the mind and the intelligence, can redirect your desires, your will, what you want to work for. The thinking, feeling, and willing. Those are the activities of the mind. But we're not actually carrying out those things. We're thinking, feeling, willing, and then the material energy in the form of this body that we have, and this larger body field is fulfilling our desires if we're eligible to have them fulfilled. So this is the vision of the realized soul. I think, where did we end? With 13 or 14? Okay, we did 14, right? Alright, so now comes some very interesting verses. Nadate kaschachit papam nachaiva sukritam vibhuhu agyani navritam jnanam tenamu yanti jantavaha. Nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. Purport: the Sanskrit word Vibhu means the Supreme Lord, who is full of unlimited knowledge, riches, strength, fame, beauty, and renunciation. He is always satisfied in himself, undisturbed by sinful or pious activities. He does not create a particular situation for any living entity, but the living entity, bewildered by ignorance, desires to be put into certain conditions of life, and thereby his chain of action and reaction begins. A living entity is, by superior nature, full of knowledge. Nevertheless, he is prone to be influenced by ignorance due to his limited power. The Lord is omnipotent, but the living entity is not. The Lord is Vibhu, or omniscient, but the living entity is Anu, or atomic. Because he is a living soul, he has the capacity to desire by his free will. Such desire is fulfilled only by the omnipotent Lord. And so, when the living entity is bewildered in his desires, the Lord allows him to fulfill those desires, but the Lord is never responsible for the actions and reactions of the particular situation which may be desired. Being in a bewildered condition, therefore, the embodied soul identifies himself with the circumstantial material body and becomes subjected to the temporary misery and happiness of life. The Lord is the constant companion of the living entity as Paramatma, or the Supersoul. And therefore, he, the Supersoul, can understand the desires of the individual soul, as one can smell the flavor or fragrance of a flower by being near it. Desire is a subtle form of conditioning for the living entity. The Lord fulfills his desire as he deserves. Man proposes and God disposes. The individual is not, therefore, omnipotent in fulfilling his desires. The Lord, however, can fulfill all desires, and the Lord, being neutral to everyone, does not interfere with the desires of the minute independent living entities. However, when one desires Krishna, the Lord takes special care and encourages one to desire in such a way that one can attain to him and be eternally happy. The Vedic hymns therefore declare, Esha u yeva sadhu karma karyati tam yam ebhyo lokebhya unnishite. Esha u eva sadhu karma karyate yam ado ninishite. The Lord engages the living entity in pious activities so that he may be elevated. The Lord engages him in impious activities so that he may go to hell. Kaushitaki Upanishad 3.8. Similarly, the Mahabharata, Vanaparva 31:27 states, Agyo jantur anisho yam atmanak sukadukkayo ishvara prerito gachet swargam vash abram evacha. The living entity is completely dependent in his distress and happiness. By the will of the Supreme, he can go to heaven or hell, as a cloud is driven by the air. Therefore, the embodied soul, by his immemorial desire to avoid Krishna consciousness, causes his own bewilderment. Consequently, although he is constitutionally eternal, blissful, and cognizant, due to the littleness of his existence, he forgets his constitutional position of service to the Lord, and is thus entrapped by nescience. And under the spell of ignorance, the living entity claims that the Lord is responsible for his conditional existence. The Vedanta Sutra 2.134 also confirms this. Vaishamya nayagrinye na sapikatvat tata hi darshiyati. The Lord neither hates nor likes anyone, although he appears to. So, who is really responsible for the sinful and pious activities? So the living entity is. We're responsible for being here in the first place, turning away from Krishna. And it's just like, we're in a prison house, so our activities, our understanding is very limited because we're undergoing the imprisonment in the material energy. So you can see agyaneva avitam jnanam, that the ignorance covers our original knowledge. This calls to mind the 3rd chapter, where it's very graphically described. What is it that impels us to do things against our own interest? Even we may have an inkling that it's not good for us, but you do it anyway. And Krishna described it as kama, It's the infection of material desire, which is simply love of God that's been perverted by contact with the material energy. So that karma covers our knowledge. The more that we're involved in sense gratification and aspirations to desires and fears and anxieties caused by frustrated desires, which is a big thing, all of that covers our original knowledge. And the very idea of spiritual life and God and the search that we need to be on doesn't even come up. It's just like I've got too much going on. There's too much going on in my life, and so we're trapped. We're trapped by the Prabhupada, so poetically and brilliantly called it the chain victimization of one fruit of activity after another, keeping us bound up in the modes of nature. So that's the Lord Himself is never responsible for the sinful activities. We're responsible ourselves. Nachaiva sukritam vibhu, for the pious activities. But the ignorance covers the knowledge, the jnana of the living entity. Te muyanti jantava. Word jantava is a word that means living entities within the material world, especially. Jantava. So how to get out of this trap? The only solution for ignorance is knowledge, real knowledge. And so that's why Prabhupada endeavored so hard to give us these books and Bhagavad Gita as it is, so that Krishna could enlighten us. Because we can't hear Him from within the heart, we're too covered. So He comes out as the Shastra. And through media, such as pure devotees such as Srila Prabhupada, He makes it available to us in a language we can read. He even provides pictures to make sure, keep our interest. All of this is Krishna's mercy. And, it's important to, because those who don't understand the real science of God, they inevitably want to approach God as an order supplier, to pray, go to the church and pray for health and wealth and, like my grandmother, be cured, whatever, like on mortgage. I mean, people must be praying hard, those who are religious now, because life is so difficult even in the United States. But that's actually, what's described in the beginning of the Bhagavatam as cheating religion, kaitava dharma. Because your faith is dependent on that your desires will be fulfilled. But inevitably, due to your karma, or everything, not all your desires will be fulfilled. And so you'll lose faith. That's not real bhakti. Bhakti is, Krishna says it's good. Chaturvadabha jantamajana sukritanorjana. This is sukriti. This is actually pious activity to approach Him in distress or in want of money or something valuable, because at least you're approaching God. You're not an out-and-out atheist, But if you never go beyond that platform, then your faith is very fragile. It's called komala shraddha. Komala shraddha means very pliable faith. It can be easily tested and broken, and you lose your faith. And if you go through too much trouble, or you perceive that there's too much trouble in the world, so many people became atheists during and after World War II because of the Holocaust and all the slaughter and innocent people getting killed, some apparently innocent people. So, but God is He's never responsible. He doesn't assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. He's not responsible for that. Embodied beings bewildered because of ignorance covers their real knowledge, and we become responsible. Just like Prabhupada would give the example that ignorance is no excuse. If you break the law, his favorite example was driving on the wrong side of the street. Because if you come to the West, suddenly in India you have to be. Did your mother ever teach you? You have to look both ways, Glenn. Look left and then right. Left because as you walk off the curb, the cars are coming from the right side. So you have to first look left, then you can look right. Now in India, they ride on the other side of the street. So if you look left, the car's coming from here. In other words, it's dangerous. You have to look right and then left. And especially driving. Prabhupada was in an accident. He was in the back seat, I think, or the front seat. And they were in Mauritius. and somebody didn't, coming from another country where they were driving on a different side of the street, and they were driving, they had a head-on crash. Luckily, somehow Prabhupada, those who were in the car, they saw Prabhupada brace himself before the accident came, as if he had some intuition. He wasn't seriously hurt, although he was slightly injured. But if you do that, and the police come, and you say, "Oh, I didn't know. I come from a country where they drive on the other side," then you're still liable. Ignorance is no excuse before the law. Similarly, our ignorance in this material world is no excuse. We perform so many sinful activities unknowingly because we're not trained properly. We still have to suffer for that. Just like a little child puts his hand into the fire, not knowing the fire is still going to burn him. So, if we're intelligent enough, we should want to come out of this state of ignorance. And that's why the Brahma Sutra, or the Vedanta Sutra, begins with the enjoining the human being. Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now, therefore, having come to the human form of life, you should inquire into the ultimate questions. Where has everything come from? What's the meaning of it all? What is this world? And how can I become free from suffering? That is Sanatana Goswami's question. If you don't come to those questions, then you stay bound in ignorance and you suffer. So suffering is produced by sin, but sin is produced by ignorance. I don't know the ramifications of what I'm doing, even though I may have learned it's bad, but I don't believe it. I don't know how bad it is. I don't know how the things are working. So if you don't know all these things, you'll be like the child who's getting into trouble and suffering out of ignorance. So agyani navatam jnanam. That's the point made here. By ignorance, it's covering your knowledge, and therefore the jantava says the living entities stay bewildered, and in that bewildered state, we perform all kinds of things that result in a lot of suffering. So, and you see how everything was in terms of desires, just as I was saying, right? Because he's a living soul, he has the capacity to desire by his free will. Such desire is fulfilled only by the omnipotent Lord. And so when the living entity is bewildered in his desires, the Lord allows him to fulfill those desires, but the Lord is never responsible for the actions and reactions of the particular situation which may be desired. Now what the Lord does do is that he comes personally or sends his emissaries to provide good instruction. Sometimes he comes himself, more likely he has his representatives, the spiritual masters. He writes these Shastra. Who wrote this? Originally Vyasadeva, right? Vyasadeva is the expansion of Krishna. He's a literary incarnation of God. And what is he writing? He's quoting Krishna's words here. So Krishna provides these things, these sources of knowledge, but it's up to us to have the presence of mind to take advantage of them, to transform our lives and to transform our desires. And that's the way we can become happy in this world. Okay, let's go on to 16. Importance of knowledge. This whole chapter is about karma yoga, action, and Krishna consciousness in knowledge. Jnanenu tutara jnanam yesham nashitam atmanaha tesham aditya jnanam prakashayati tatparam. So when you see that word "to," you see that in the first line there? Second word. That means "but." So he's referring back to the previous verse. The Supreme does not assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. Now he's talking about knowledge, which is like the sunshine. When, however, there's your "but." When, however, one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything as the sun lights up everything in the daytime. Purport. Those who have forgotten Krishna must certainly be bewildered, but those who are in Krishna consciousness are not bewildered at all. It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Sarvam Jnana Plavena, Jnanagdi Dagdakarmanam, and Nahi Jnane Nasadrasham. So what this means is Sarvam Jnana Plavena is the boat of knowledge. He's referring to the boat of knowledge, also to the fire of knowledge which burns up all one's karma. And Nahi Jnane Sadrasham, nothing can be compared to knowledge. Knowledge is always highly esteemed. And what is that knowledge? Perfect knowledge is achieved when one surrenders unto Krishna, as it is said in the 7th chapter, 19th verse. Bahonam janmanamante gyanavanma papadyate. After passing through many, many births, when one is perfect in knowledge, or when one perfect in knowledge surrenders unto Krishna, or when one attains Krishna consciousness, then everything is revealed to him, as everything is revealed by the sun in the daytime. And that's from the present verse here we just read. The living entity is bewildered in so many ways. For instance, when he unceremoniously thinks himself God, he actually falls into the last snare of nescience. If a living entity were God, then how could he become bewildered by nescience? I just fixed that one. Did you ever hear the subjunctive case? It's used when it's contrary to fact. You know, if I were to go to Balboa Park, you know, then I wouldn't do as well. I would not be able to do as well on Sankirtan as if I went down to Ocean Beach. It's contrary to fact. If I were to go there, then this would happen. It's like a plural thing, rather than if I was to go there. So somehow this creeped in. It should be subjunctive because it's against, contrary to fact. The living entity is not God. If a living entity were God, then how could he become bewildered by nescience? Does God become bewildered by nescience? If so, then nescience, or Satan, is greater than God. Real knowledge can be obtained from a person who is in perfect Krishna consciousness. I might have to change that next. Does God become bewildered by nescience? If so, then nescience, or Satan, would be greater than God. You see that? I think I have to do that one too. I forgot that one. Real knowledge can be obtained from a person who is in perfect Krishna consciousness. Therefore, one has to seek out such a bona fide spiritual master, and under him learn what Krishna consciousness is. For Krishna consciousness will certainly drive away all nescience, as the sun drives away darkness. Even though a person may be in full knowledge that he is not this body, but is transcendental to the body, he still may not be able to discriminate between the soul and the supersoul. However, he can know everything well if he cares to take shelter of the perfect bona fide Krishna conscious spiritual master. One can know God and one's relationship with God only when one actually meets a representative of God. A representative of God never claims that he is God, although he is paid all the respect ordinarily paid to God, because he has knowledge of God. One has to learn the distinction between God and the living entity. Lord Shri Krishna therefore stated in the 2nd chapter, 2:12, that every living being is individual and that the Lord also is individual. They were all individuals in the past, they are individuals at present, and they will continue to be individuals in the future, even after liberation. At night we see everything as one in the darkness, but in the daytime, when the sun is up, we see everything in its real identity. Identity with individuality in spiritual life is real knowledge. So, coming out into the sunlight of Krishna consciousness. Krishna Surya Sama Maya Hoy Andhakar Yahan Krishna Tanay Mahayadikar. This is the motto of the Back to Godhead magazine. As far right from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that Krishna is like the sun, Maya is like deep darkness. Wherever the sun of Krishna shines, Maya cannot be, have any power, any influence. So Prabhupada is referring to verse 2:12. It's often cited against the Mayavadis. Krishna, the 2nd verse, he speaks to Arjuna. Where he starts speaking this real instruction, and he says, "Natve vaham jatu nasam, natvam neme janadipa, natchaiva nabhavishyata sarve vayamatak padam." There's a long purport when Prabhupada is blasting the Mayavadis, because what Krishna says, "Natve vaham jatu nasam," never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these warriors, these kings, warriors. And in the future, we will all continue to exist in this individual way. So that refutes the idea that we lose our identity, merge into the Brahman, and lose our, We're individuals now. We've always been individuals, and we'll be individuals in the future. But the question is, how will we experience that individuality? In our conditioned state, we identify with the particular body we're in, and if it happens to be non-human, or subhuman, then we're completely covered by the modes of nature, and we just living and suffering in various ways. So that, but one way or another, we will remain individuals. Even in our liberated state, we'll be individuals, and we'll never lose that. So we want this light as the sun shines up everything in the daytime. So how to stay in that light? That's the opportunity of the bhaktas, of the devotees who are serious about cultivating knowledge through the shastra, through hearing and chanting, and and thinking about discussing the philosophy and making it actually be our guiding light, our intelligence. That's why we encourage you this phrase, shastra chakshus, to see through the eyes of shastra, and to make the Bhagavad Gita our, the content of our intelligence, that it informs our intelligence. That's what Prabhupada describes the Bhagavad Gita is. Okay, we're almost out of time, so we'll begin text 17. We'll read 17 on Monday. And now a couple of little sweet verses for you. Okay. Well, it's a nice poem. I think I can do the whole thing, because I'll do mostly English. The Kevalashtaka. It's about the holy name. You may have heard it before, but it's really nice. So it begins Madaram Madalebhyopi Mangalebhyopi Mangalam Pavanam Pavanebhyopi Hare Nama Iva Kevalam. Now that last line comes from the famous verse Hare Nama Hare Nama Hare Nama Iva Kevalam. Of sweet things, it's the sweetest you will taste at any time. Of things that bring good fortune, it's the perfect paradigm. Of things that purify, it purifies most powerfully. The holy name of Shri Hari is surely all that be. From Brahma's realm atop the sky, down to the lowly grass, illusion reigns in Maya Devi's treacherous morass. The truth, the only truth, the name of Shri Hari. The holy name of Shri Hari is surely all that be. He's the Guru, He's the Father, He's the friend most true. And she's the real mother who most kindly teaches you to always chant and hear the holy name of Shri Hari. The holy name of Shri Hari is surely all that be. Remember that our final breath may come at any time, no matter if we're old and sick or in our youthful prime. So young and old alike should chant the name incessantly. The holy name of Shri Hari is surely all that be. Lord Shri Hari forever dwells wherever devotees whose hearts are fixed on him and free of all impurities uplift their voices high and sing his name in ecstasy. The holy name of Shri Hari is surely all that be. Alas, what sorrow, what great pain, the worst calamity for people to forget the holy name of Shri Hari. Although the name's a priceless gem, mere broken glass they see. The holy name of Shri Hari is surely all that be. Just fill your ears, just fill them with the name of Shri Hari. Just chant the name with all sincerity. Just sing the holy name eternally. The holy name of Shri Hari is surely all that be. It makes this world appear like bits of straw upon the ground. Resplendently it reigns supreme. Divinity and sound is filled with transcendental bliss and peerless purity. The holy name of Shri Hari is surely all that be. Inspired to glorify the holy name of Shri Hari, Sri Nilakanta wrote this hymn in Sanskrit poetry. I pray that those who hear this lowly version made by me will chant the holy name of Shri Hari in ecstasy. All glory to Srila Prabhupada.